Yo, Deadman mode Armageddon is just around the corner, and there are tens and even hundreds of millions of GP available to any player of any skill level, if you're willing to put the time in, that is. This guide and the advice at the end are going to be a little bit more abstract than the Cannonball video yesterday was, because they're going to involve a wider range of paths that you can take based on what you're interested in getting into this week. I'm going to be doing my best to lay it out in a way that accounts for a lot of the potential setbacks regarding availability of NPC spawns or even PvP interaction, but at the end of the day, it's Deadman mode, and sometimes you're just gonna die. If you're looking to build this account from the start, as soon as the Deadman mode servers do open up, you'll likely be far enough ahead of the rest of the pack that you won't really have to worry about anyone bothering you as long as you stay on top of gear upgrades and continue to train the entire time. If you plan on playing on an account that already has a Deadman mode profile, you're gonna have to log into your account on World 45 ahead of time and talk to Nigel to reset your account. MAGE did confirm that unlike last year, established Deadman profiles that get reset, you should be able to spawn in Varrock regardless of if this is a fresh account or a Deadman profile that you reset. As soon as you spawn in, you're going to want to start heading towards the GE, and you can drop a bunch of this random starting stuff that you get, like the tinderbox and the axe and the fishing net and stuff like that. And then once you have enough inventory space, you can open your starter pack and take a look at what your starter sigil is. If it works out the same as last year, once you get to the GE, you'll be able to open your quest tab, and there should be a sigils tab that looks like a little skull. It should have you select one sigil, and you're going to want to pick the Ruthless Ranger sigil for this build. And before you leave the bank, you're going to want to attune to it as well. I'll cover it at the end on a timestamp, but if you're looking to go a mage route, you definitely can. It's just harder to source the gear and supplies that are going to be required to outperform the rag range setup that we're going to build here today. Going back to what you got from the starter pack, first and foremost, you're going to be looking for the Sigil of Consistency, and then after that, you could also look for the Rigorous Ranger or even Resilience. But if you don't get any of these three, you can simply just examine it and see for yourself what it does and if it sounds useful to you. The Sigil of Consistency is by far the best sigil that this build can have, as it guarantees you successfully hit at least a 1 on every attack, as well as adding a +1 to whatever damage you do roll on a naturally successful attack. The aforementioned ranged starting sigil has a 10% chance on successful hits to proc 10 damage over 6 seconds, and that's going to be doubled against targets with no remaining run energy. Since NPCs have no stamina, it's always going to hit at 20 on every NPC that it procs on, and since you have a very low accuracy roll versus breach NPCs like Grardor or Rex, consistency is going to allow you to guarantee that 10% chance to roll that 20 damage every single time that you attack. If you combine this with even Iron Knives, you're guaranteeing 1 damage every 2 ticks and a 10% chance to roll that 20 damage. The most recent update blog for Deadman mode outlined changes to starting sigils that also included the Ruthless Ranger. Its base damage was reduced from 15 to 10 in the first bracket, which is why the edit that I made last week doesn't really match up with what I'm explaining here, but you get the gist. Rigorous Ranger is going to be a close second to start off with, just because it does give you a bit of accuracy and the effect of any of the Ava's devices as well without taking up a cape slot. And finally, Resilience isn't too OP for DPS, but with the buff this season, you're going to regenerate 1 HP every 4 seconds. That'll be halved to 1 HP every 2 seconds if you have Rapid Heal on, and then halved again to 1 HP per second if you have a Regen Bracelet on. This 1 HP doesn't sound like a lot, but even without the Regen Bracelet, you'll be able to heal a shark and a half of HP every minute, which is incredible for sustaining your HP from Breach Poke. Like I said, there's definitely a chance that you get a sigil you'd like to use, even if it isn't one of the 3 that I just read off, so just read over it and decide for yourself if it's something that you'd enjoy using. Once your sigils are sorted, you're going to set your spawn to the GE by talking to Bergs and Burson, and then walk south to the Varrock West Bank. Once you're there, you can bank everything except for your starter bow and 3 to 5 food. Because there isn't a starter bow on World 45 where I'm recording this run through, I'm just going to start with 28 range, so I can use the Dorg bow right off the bat. You'll notice that a bit of the XP rates and mechanics don't line up with what I'm saying, and this is just because World 45 has lower XP rates, no sigils, no double dragon bone drops, and different spawn mechanics. But I promise you, if you follow this guide in Deadman Armageddon, you'll get to where you need to be without any issues. After your inventory set, you're going to want to head east now to the range shop and buy a Dorg bow as well as 8 packs of bone bolts. You might only have enough for 7 if shop restock is weird, but if it works out right, it should be 8 packs of bolts. Training the 28 range before you head to the dragons just so that you can have a little bit of extra accuracy from that Dorg bow is a waste of time in my opinion. On the first bracket, each time Ruthless Ranger procs on an NPC, you'll gain 1800 range XP. Especially if you have consistency, but even without it, it's only going to be 8 Ruthless Ranger procs to get 28 range, just from the XP of that alone. At this point, you can either run straight north to the East Dragons, or you can run to Edgeville and take the portal to Ferox Enclave, and then you can run to the North Gate straight out to those dragons that are really close. These ones might be packed, and if they are, you can just go check the East Drags or the Slayer Cave, but it's likely they're all going to be packed because it's day 1 Deadman mode, so just do your best to find a dragon and hold your ground. Like I said, you're going to start with the starter bow and safe spot a dragon on rapid until you have 28 range, and that should go by in no time. Clearing the 7 green dragons should go much faster than it's taking me here when you have sigils, as green dragons only have 75 HP. This means that it's only going to be 3 to 4 Ruthless Ranger procs in order to kill each dragon. Once you have your 7 down, you're going to make sure you pick up all 14 ear bones and 7 hides. Hopefully you have the inventory space. You could have also gotten a looting bag at this point as well, but you're going to want to run to the Wieldy Chaos Altar in the far west. And as you can see by my timer here in the bottom right of chat, it took less than 30 minutes to kill the 7 dragons, and that's without the sigil that'll 2-hit them. Once you're here, use your bones on the altar until you're 45 prayer, which should take 25 successful bones used on the altar. Make sure you don't go over this. Sometimes you'll save a little bit extra bones and you'll have some left over, but you definitely want to sit at 45 prayer. If you go any higher than this, it's going to reduce your final offensive stat potential. If you're just short of 45 and dragons are way too packed to be viable, instead of going back to dragons immediately for 1 or 2 more bones, you could just bury some bones or whatever you decide to train on to get to the 45 as well. I decided just to sit at 40 as I'm not planning to do anything with this account until Deadman mode drops, so I'm not really concerned about hitting the level, but if I were short in Armageddon, I'd probably just go back for 1 to 2 more dragon bones to use on the altar. After you hit 45 prayer, you're going to either suicide to a dragon or the altar depending on where you ended up. PVM deaths are going to be a free teleport to the Grand Exchange, and then you can head right over to Edgeville to recollect your lost items from death for free. I would advise avoiding this method once you're out of your 60-minute timer, just because people can attack you and you're not going to have anything on you, but this definitely works for some time save on your protection. At this point, as long as you have 5 minutes of your protection left, you should go run the Stronghold of Security and return to GE with your 10k. You're either going to want to put an offer in on the Grand Exchange for Rigorous Ranger Sigil for about 7 to 8k, or you could just buy the Ava's device from Purdue for 7k. Now at this point, you're really strong. You should sell your green dragon loot for better food and return to the dragons and simply fight off any contenders. You could invest in a stamina potion, and that is going to allow you to stay above 0 stamina if another ranger does attack you. Even though your stamina isn't going to drain naturally this Deadman mode, the Ruthless Ranger Sigil still drains your run by 15 every time that it hits you, so it'll take around 6 Ruthless Ranger procs until it starts hitting you for 20s instead of 10s. A sip of a stamina is going to allow you to stay above that 10 stamina threshold and half the damage of your opponent's sigil while yours is ripping 20s through them. I'd advise checking the GE for prices of Blighted Manas, Karam ones, and anything else that would come from Wilderness Slayer monsters or pirates or the Wilderness Agility Arena. Considering that they're all obtainable through pretty early game means, they'll likely be worth only a couple hundred GP this early on. If returning the greens doesn't seem like a viable training method due to either player density or just NPC availability, you could opt to complete the Varrock Museum quiz and then begin Wilderness Slayer to start stacking up extra money, or just go hit something safe like the Big Frogs of Lumbridge. I would advise bringing your starter staff with you wherever you go and just getting at least 25 magic for Varrock teleports. If you get something as good as I did, like Fire Giants here, you're going to want to consider dumping a bit of GP into water spells, as they're going to hit harder and way more accurately as well. Regardless of where you end up though, just keep range training until you're around 61 or 62. As long as you just keep hitting NPCs, you should be stronger than anyone around you now, so just keep your inventory full of food, use a looting bag to hold your spoils, and you're nearly impossible to kill for the first few hours. Once you're around 50 range, you could also look to invest some of your profits into a magic shortbow and rune arrows. This will have the same max hit as the Dorkbow, but it is a 1-tick faster weapon with a special attack, so with consistency and Ruthless Ranger, you should win pretty much any fight if you have an MSB and a full inventory of food. Once you're 62 range, you can figure out where you want to mage train. Preferably, you want to go to something with 100% elemental weakness like Ice Giants or Fire Giants. And just like with range, regardless of where you decide to train, just do your best to keep hitting things no matter where until you're 63 mage so that you can stay ahead of the crowd. If you bring your MSB with and a full inventory of food to your mage training spot, you should be able to fend off any prospective goofballs as well. I know I've mentioned it a couple times around here, but just make sure that as you go, you're investing all your money into gear upgrades like MSB and rune arrows, red d'hide or blue d'hide chaps and van braces, Ava's accumulator, a power, or even a glory if you're really rich like that, staminas, prayer pots, better food, anything like that. That's going to increase your chance of survivability. Once you're 62 range, 63 mage, and 45 prayer, you're going to be pretty close to your cap now. The real cap for the 50 combat is going to be 63 with 45 prayer, but in case you had to fight anyone, I just wanted to leave some wiggle room for that range XP to defend yourself with. You can go ahead and get 63 range at this point, and even a little bit over that if you want to get your 58 HP as well without gaining another range level, but that 1 HP is very unlikely to make a meaningful difference in PvP, so there really isn't an issue if you do continue to sit at 62. Once you're comfortable with where you're at stats wise and you're not 51 combat yet, you're going to want to home teleport to Lumbridge and talk to Nigel in the graveyard to lock your XP. This way, even if you do go with a PVM based moneymaker, and as well as when you're farming breaches, you're never going to level up and you're going to stay in this bottom bracket. You You could also manually train 50 attack first if you'd like to go for Ibans, but like I said earlier, range is going to be much stronger in most cases and cheaper to use. If this is your main account and you're not just looking to farm breaches to swap out or in for different accounts, you're going to want to start looking into moneymakers at this point. You could go back to Wildy Slayer or Dragons, or take a peek at my Cannonballs guide to either get a rebuild method to kickstart your next batch, or even just safely farm GP in your downtime. If you're looking for something a bit more fun than that, you could also head to Barrows. It's not optimally farmable in these stats, but it's 100% doable. You can MSB Airman that with the combat changes last month, Windwave is going to out DPS Ibans on every single remaining brother. In Deadman mode, if you can snipe an early barrels piece, you're going to get rich, but on top of that, there's a chance for tier 5 emblems from the higher level brothers, as well as, at the very least, you're going to be profiting good runes. Whatever moneymaker you do choose, you're going to want to invest in upgrades before the first breach. The best thing that you can do for yourself is get the Sigil of Consistency, which I explained earlier why this is important, but after that you can look for something like Rigorous Ranger or Resilience for the third if you haven't obtained either of those yet. Another Sigil upgrade that you could look to include would be a Rune Crossbow with Diamond Bolts combined with the Sigil of the Gunslinger. This is the range branch off from Les Deadman's Ninja Sigil, and if you're unaware, this sigil just reduces the attack rate of any 5-tick weapon by 1 tick. And since the RCB on Rapid is a 5-tick weapon, this is effectively a flat 20% DPS increase to your Rune Crossbow. I'd even argue this Ruthless Gunslinger Rigorous Ranger combo is a better option than Consistency Knives, and that's just considering that only one Ruthless Ranger proc can be active on a monster at one time. So even if you're not the lucky one that does get to proc the Ruthless Ranger on a breach monster, you can still hit low 30s every 4 ticks with Eagle Eye and range pots with Diamond Bullets, and this build could definitely salvage an MVP from a kill that you didn't even get the Ranger proc on. As I did mention earlier, you could also definitely opt to go for more of a mage heavy build with Ibans, but it's going to cost you a few hours to quest Underground Pass after you train the stats up, as well as a few 100,000 to upgrade the staff, and then another 200,000 every time that you die with it as well. But if you combine this with the Sigil of Arcane Swiftness, you will have a 4-tick 25 max hit spell, and this is going to shred the tankier breach NPCs like Rex and Slayer monsters, even the Goblins or the Mage Arena 2 bosses. And this does sound good, but you could also just get lucky with an Iron Knife and hit a 30 with a range relic, so like I said, it's definitely an option, but it's much more expensive to build, rebuild, and maintain, whereas with the Ruthless Ranger build, you can literally just die and open your starter pack, and then return straight to a breach with your sigils and a starter bow and fill your inventory up with 0 risk. If you do decide to run a mage build, I would advise instead of going to Green Dragons, you start at Varrock, spend your 5k on an air staff and an even number of water and mine runes. Bank everything but your water staff, starter staff, your runes, and then 3 to 5 food. Attune your menacing mage sigil and then run to Edgeville. Here you can use the portal to get to the Isle of Souls to fight blue dragons, which are weaker to mage than green dragons are, so this is definitely the place you want to go if you're going to go mage route. On top of blue dragons just being more weak to mage in general, they're also weak to water spells as all chromatic dragons are. This means that as soon as you unlock Water Strike, you can hit up to 12s with a tier 1 spell that's almost 90% accurate on blue dragons. You'll want to look to get a Sigil of the Meticulous Mage as well at some point, as this is going to save runes and offer an accuracy bonus as well. Regardless of what combat style you go for, the best thing that you could do to better your rolls at a breach is also one of the highest risk options available in this bracket. This is going to require you to invest probably over 1 million GP on the first day, or even up to 2 or 3 mil later on, into the Trinket of the Undead, as well as the Sigil of the Augmented Thrall. But with the buffs this year, you'll be able to spawn and maintain a Thrall that can max hit 15s on anything that you're targeting. The only downside is that you have to keep the Trinket on you, which means you'll be risking over 1 mil at all times on an account with 50 HP. I did this last Deadman mode and it worked for a little bit, but once rubies got into circulation, they were just too strong, and I was averaging more MVPs with just rag bolting rubies than I did with my consistency in thralls. These poorly cropped screenshots are really the only record that I could find from my escapades in the lower brackets from the first 2 days last Deadman mode, but pretty much every breach was like this before rubies were very prominent. And since ruby bolts aren't going to be working this Deadman mode versus breaches, consistency knives is undoubtedly going to see a resurgence, and you're probably just going to be missing out on MVP rolls if you don't at least give it a shot. I don't have much experience in the middle brackets, as I've only ever really run a first bracket breacher and a top bracket slayer and raid account. That said, there's definitely some nutty money makers on the brackets that you could farm without fear of those raid boss builds that you see all Deadman mode in like the upper brackets 4th and 5th. If you're looking for some relatively safe and easy GP this week, I'd also say that one of your best options is training your Slayer up to 75 on a 2nd or 3rd bracket account. You can build a decent 70 combat rag ranger at the top of the 2nd bracket with 78 range for Morgan's weapons, 55 magic for Alex, 45 prayer for the mid-tier offensive prayers like Eagle Eye and Mystic Might, as well as 40 defense so that you can run Runeplate legs and Black D'hide bodies. You can also assemble a disgusting 90 combat range tank at like the peak of the 3rd bracket. This is going to have 70 defense for tank legs and K-tops, 92 range for just untouchable DPS output, 90 magic is going to help you secure a few extra splashes versus mages, and then 52 prayer is just going to add a little bit more of annoyance and staying power, just so that you can run a little bit more supplies down on whoever gets on you. Regardless of what build you go for, you can run like a rune crossbow with the gunslinger, ruthless ranger, and then either resilience or restoration for sustain. And you can mow through those incredibly profitable mid-game Slayer monsters like Kurask, Wyverns, and Gargoyles. All of these are going to net you tens of millions of GP per hour with swap rates after you swap out your spoils. Since locking your XP only locks your combats this Deadman mode, you will be able to train your Slayer as well as other skills after you hit your level cap for your bracket and lock your XP. You really just can't go wrong with a beefy Reg Ranger in Deadman. Originally, I was going to make a guide to help newer players through the process of building a raiding account, but my plan relies a lot on putting just inhuman hours onto multiple accounts for the entire first day, so I figure it's better to just show you how I do it over the next week through a progression series. If you're interested in seeing how I build and fund a raider on the first day of Deadman mode and swap out hundreds of millions of GP, or how I clear early bracket breaches for some of the easiest riches in the game, feel free to subscribe so you don't miss anything that I put out over the next 2 weeks. That's all I got for you today though. See ya.